Hey, what's going on? You are listening to Right Path to Retirement. I am Jeff Miles here with Jimmy Lynn. And I got to tell you, he is one of the people in Vegas that you need to go see when you're thinking about not just your future and retirement, but also if you're already in that place. Maybe you have a family member who is in that place as well, and you want to talk about what does retirement look like here in 2024. I know it's different now than it has been in the past for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, and that's what we are going to be diving into on these podcast episodes moving forward. So without further ado, Jimmy Lynn, how are you, man?
I'm great, Jeff. How are you?
Very, very good. So first thing I want to do is just kind of get a background. Just tell me a little bit about who is Jimmy Lynn, not just kind of like when you started your career here in retirement planning, but I don't know. Let's go back to let's say 9 years old Jimmy and kind of take us from there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. And actually, this is a story that I tell a lot in the workshops that I do locally here in Las Vegas. And I didn't even realize how impactful this story was because it's just, my honest truth. But every time I tell the story, the participants in our seminars, they always come up to me afterwards and tell me how they relate to the story that I tell. But essentially, it all goes back to my father. At a young age, I always say that my father is the reason for everything that I do. He is a far better father than I will ever be. And it really boils down to, his priorities and his dedication to his family. But really kind of going back to the origins of all of this is you asked about me, the 9-year-old Jimmy. It really starts with the 9-year-old Patrick Lynn, who's the patriarch of the Lynn family. And growing up, he actually, at the age of 9, fled China to seek a better life in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, he met my mother. He had my 2 older brothers, Ed and Warren. But then at the ripe age of 35, he actually decided that, he lived a very comfortable life in Taiwan, but he wanted that American dream. So he actually left the family behind. He came to America and went to Texas A&M University, got his master's degree in accounting.
Gig 'em, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. I was raised in Houston, so A&M. I'm a Houston Cougar, but yeah, I hear you.
I'm a Texas Longhorn fan. No offense, but
yeah, we'll
let that slide.
Look past that. Right. So yeah, essentially though, I went to A&M, moved out to Los Angeles, and moved the family over. Then at that point, he had my older sister Gloria, and then of course they were blessed with yours truly, right? So we had an amazing middle-class life, memorable family vacations. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs, and literally my dad lived the American dream. He put 4 kids through college. So that is the bar that was set for us. So with all that said, you would expect that at the age of 65, he did what everyone else did, right, Jeff? What would that be at age 65?
You retire and you start collecting all your money.
Ideally, right? So unfortunately, my father, who was a businessman, a family man, and a highly educated man, at the age of 65, he had to get a part-time job.
Oh, man.
Just to maintain the lifestyle that he and my mother were used to. So that just did not make sense to me at the time. But I was probably a selfish 20-year-old living my life. But as I've gotten older, I really look back and in retrospect, with his knowledge, with the income that he made during his working years, that really should not have happened. And that really inspired me because as I looked into and analyzed why his circumstances turned out the way it was, it's really because of the lack of education. And not the lack of education as far as his knowledge, but retirement planning is really a whole different ball of wax, right? And we live in a time where there are podcasts like this.
Sure.
There are YouTube channels. There are workshops and seminars locally that people can attend. But during the time that he retired, he didn't have those resources. So there was no education. There was no plan in place to take what he's built over his lifetime and turn that into a comfortable retirement. And that's really what inspired me to go into this field and really be an educator in this field.
You mentioned the part that this probably relates to so many different people, and I can only imagine that if whoever's listening right now and they're thinking, okay, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. You work hard for all these years. you get to that point where you think you've done enough. You think you've done enough. And why? Because maybe society tells us you watch all the TV commercials and they say, yeah, you're supposed to save and, your 401k and Social Security and everything else. But there's no real education, like you said, as it pertains to, okay, how do I plan for when it's time for me to retire? How do I plan for me to, put this money in places where I know it's going to last me as long as it needs to last me? See, nobody's telling you that in the TV commercial. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely not. I always tell people there are so many moving parts in retirement, and the industry would make you think that all it's about is investing. You keep investing, you keep accumulating those assets, and everything else will take care of itself.
Right.
And that could be no further from the truth, right? Once you get into retirement, you're in what we call the distribution phase.
Right.
And there are so many moving parts as far as how your assets that you've collected over time, how are they going to be taxed? What kind of exposure are you going to get to downside risk? Like you really can't be investing in your 60s the same way you are in your 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Right.
You really have to have a strategy for preserving those assets so they're available for you, so that ultimately what your goal is to be able to replace those paychecks that you're used to during your working years with a lifetime stream of income that you will never outlive. And that is ultimately the goal, to where you can live a stress-free retirement and really do the things that you've worked so hard and you've delayed for so long. And when it's your golden years, you want to make sure that those assets are working for you and you're not working for them.
When you take the economics classes in school, they never get to the retirement necessarily as far as like what you should do. When you take a job, you think, okay, cool. So, I'm going to enroll in my 401k plan, and then my employer is going to contribute so much and whatever. By the time I'm all done and it's time for me to retire, then, hopefully I've got a pretty good nest egg there and I'll be set. You think to yourself, well, I've also worked really hard and, I've made a decent amount of money. So Social Security is also something that maybe I can count on. So when you put all those things together, and man, I'm not the most highly skilled mathematician. At the same time, that sounds like an algorithm that is pretty difficult to try to figure out, especially as it pertains to the distribution part. People may have an idea that, don't I just get regular monthly checks every month? Or they think, well, 401k, well, I know that I didn't pay any taxes when I put it into my 401k, but how does that work now? A lot of people are probably very confused on how that all works, especially as it comes to the distribution phase, right?
Well, yeah, and you're absolutely right, Jeff, is that this is just not something that they teach in school. But when these individuals, they've worked so hard to build up these 401ks, TSPs, 403bs, they're ready to utilize that in retirement in combination with the Social Security that they've built over time. Oftentimes, they don't realize that whatever you have in those 401ks, obviously, that's not all of your money.
Right.
And in fact, what you're going to be taxed on that is solely dependent on the U.S. government, right? And depending on how our government's working, what our debt looks like, which last time I checked, we're about $34 trillion in national debt. So I can't forecast where taxes are going to be, but I would be concerned. And if you're concerned about that, you want to make sure you got a tax plan, because otherwise you're beholden to what the U.S. government wants to tax you at the point in which you take out that money. And when you combine that with Social Security, oftentimes people don't understand that what determines how much of your Social Security is taxable is going to be based on the amount of money that you take out of that 401k. So there's a lot of moving parts that people don't forecast, which ultimately kind of derails part of their retirement plans, because they may think that they have $15,000 a year for their vacations, and in reality, they may have $10,000, and that could be a huge difference in the things that they're going to experience in retirement.
Jimmy, what I love about your story more than anything else is the fact that you decided to do this because of your own father's situation after watching him work so hard and everything that he had gone through. And then all of a sudden, when he's having to take a part-time job at 65 years old, when he's supposed to be trying to enjoy those years, and, like any son or daughter, I'm sure you're probably thinking, gosh, Dad, I didn't realize how much you were sacrificing for us when you were growing up. And, I almost kind of look at it, I don't want to call it a sacrifice that you're doing necessarily for your father, but I think you're doing it in his honor, so to speak. And I think that's pretty admirable, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it is, like I said, in the moment, I don't think I realized the sacrifices that he was making. He did things like to help down payments on kids' houses, paid for college, paid for weddings. And he did all this because he felt like that's what a father should do.
Right.
Looking back, he took on more of a burden that he really needed to shoulder, and it impacted his retirement. But it does create a lens for me of when I'm sitting across the table from another retiree, it's important that I look at their situation as if they were my parent, right? Because you only have one chance at retirement. And I want to make sure that my clients are educated in all those different areas that could pop up that they just are not aware of, not to any fault of their own, but just because the education is not readily available to them. And, they're focused on their own fields of expertise. And so I feel like that's my job. And that's why these workshops that I do locally, people take time out of their evenings, rushing from work to attend some of our seminars that cover things like Social Security, estate planning, tax planning. And it's so important to me because they could be spending time with their kids, with their spouses, but they're being proactive about learning about how to properly structure their retirement. And so I value the fact that they're attending these events, and it's important to me to really, like you said, in honor of my father, to educate these people so that they don't face the same issues that he faced in retirement.
It sounds like as you're getting to know this podcast, if you're listening right now, first of all, please make sure you like the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to all of the further episodes that we're going to have coming your way. And Jimmy, give people kind of an idea what we're going to be talking about in these retirement podcasts as far as what can they expect from you as a retirement planner.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, my focus, as I think I've said a few times, and I want to emphasize, it's all about education. I believe that, again, there's so many moving parts with regards to retirement planning. When you talk about Medicare, estate planning, taxes, income planning, asset preservation, they all kind of work in conjunction with each other. And so my goal with anyone listening is really to kind of duplicate what I do in my seminars. In my live seminars, we go over all these topics so people are aware. You almost want to, people don't know what they don't know, right? So that's the goal, is to expose them to these different areas so they start asking questions of how they're situated. But the problem with these live seminars, Jeff, is, I do a few of these every month. Maybe over the course of the year, I can talk to 1,000 people. I can help 1,000 people to educate them on the things that they need to be aware of. And I'm hoping that this podcast can be a platform where we can, instead of helping 1,000 people a year, maybe we can help 1,000 people a month be more educated on their situation.
I love that. Well, listen, if you want more information from Jimmy and the right path to retirement, check out the podcast. Every single month, we're going to release a couple of episodes for you, but you can also check out his website. It's rightpathtoretirement.com. Again, that's rightpathtoretirement.com. You're going to find these episodes for this podcast on the website. And Jimmy, there's also going to be a way for people to get in contact with you there if they want to, maybe they want to join one of your seminars, or maybe they just want to come in and have a consultation and just kind of say, hey, Jimmy, how can you help me out?
Yeah, absolutely. We encourage people to attend our live events, but we also do offer complimentary consultations, so they can call our office at 702-805-7000. We'll just sit down very casually, talk about their situation, figure out what keeps them up at night, and then see if we can kind of expose them to things that they may or not have thought of. And there's no obligation for that. It's just something that we provide for the community.
I love that. Well, once again, the website is rightpathtoretirement.com. Again, rightpathtoretirement.com. This is the Right Path to Retirement podcast with Jimmy Lynn. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Awesome job today on our first podcast, man. This has been fun.
Thank you, Jeff.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Right Path Wealth Management. Right Path Wealth Management is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Right Path Wealth Management are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities fees of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Right Path Wealth Management is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained by sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Right Path Wealth Management.